I work for Google. In Google, I'm part of the organization called Google for Work, which is basically our enterprise solution for small businesses and large companies. Anywhere from cloud, everybody heard about cloud, right? Cloud, apps, and everything to go what we call beyond productivity. My experience with intrapreneurship, whatever that is, and it's open to your definition, doesn't come just from Google. Before Google, I was at Skype. Skype, very small startup, scaled up very fast, then got acquired a few times, last acquisition by Microsoft, operated like a small team in a huge company, which has its benefits. And then, I don't know if you heard the latest news that Microsoft is closing the Skype London office, which used to be a landmark in the city, which is unfortunate. So, when I'm saying if you're not creating trouble, you're not creating much, I mean it in the good sense of things. I've always been considered, ever since a young boy, as a troublemaker, but I took that as a good thing. Because if you think of it, organizations today can become very complex as they grow, as they scale. And if you're not doing or changing stuff on a regular basis, not just every year for spring cleaning, then you may find yourself in a mess. So we need to understand that we're looking at a different world nowadays. It's a new digital world. Everyone's connected, always on, always connected. And this is what I'm going to talk about. So I'm going to explain a little bit what's happening in terms of the market, how Google sees it, from the disruptions, primarily coming from technology. What should we do as organizations? And again, it's the same for startups and large organizations. And how can we do that? There's a lot of buzzwords out there. Intrapreneurship is one of them. What do they actually mean? How do you execute on it? And just a view into the natural way of working, the Google way, in a way. So first, Google obviously has changed a bit of the structure. About a year ago, we've changed the structure of Google. Now it's called Alphabet. It's a holding company. Google is just the G. So we're a bunch of characters in the world of Google. The reason for that is we found out that the best way to start an idea, a really new idea, and get it to materialize is by having a loosely coupled structure. By having too much reporting and too much elements into a startup that just starts, you're not going to get too much. Now, it doesn't say that it's impossible to do so, but we think that this method is the ideal way. Each one of those companies would also have a P&L and expected to manage almost like a complete independent organization. And some of the innovations that are out there in the market and they're working on, I think you're familiar with some of them. A cool thing that I thought to present, I don't know how it will go, is TiltBrush. I don't know if you heard about TiltBrush. It's actually a startup that Google acquired, which lets artists or anyone actually paint in virtual reality. And what's really unique and cool about it, and this is just a very simple video, is that you can actually paint something and step into your drawing. So think of it, you can paint a cartoon character and actually see it in 3D, interact with it. And the paintings are not just stagnant; they could be fire and they're moving. So that's a really, really cool innovation called TiltBrush. Check it out. There are much better videos than the one I have over here. Google's scale. So who here uses any Google product? I should end right here, right? So yeah, I mean the scale of Google is just massive. And even if you're there for a while, it's just amazing how what goes behind every search query on your mobile or anywhere across the world. And Google needed to build that sort of scale and infrastructure in order to deliver in the scale and the availability that it has right now. And these are just some examples. Obviously, cloud platform and apps is my key focus right now. So let's understand a little bit what's happening from the technology side, people, or business. From the tech side, the three main issues that I see are happening is, first of all, data. There's abundance of data everywhere. That's nothing new. That's nothing innovative. And this is just an example of the global internet traffic that's scaling massively. On the other side, there's mobility. And this is how mobile has penetrated everywhere. Mobile is our prime device more than the desktop. Searches are more on mobile. Ads revenue more on mobile than anything else. And behind both of these is the cloud. Now, cloud doesn't actually mean just move your data centers into the cloud. It's move your entire operations on the cloud. If you think you're a developer, 70% of your code is actually not your core thing. You're doing a lot of code for infrastructure, for tools. Organizations can take that away for you so you can focus on what you do best and have the same sort of infrastructure that Google uses for their sort of products. And obviously, Google is not the only provider of that, but cloud is massive. From the people side, we have urbanization, everybody flocking around the city. We have social, everything we do, someone needs to see it, someone needs to know about it. And if you go into the organization, then there's motivations have changed in terms of the needs, the hours, the workspace, the tenor. Some leaders and managers understand that and work accordingly. Some miss out, and by that miss out on talent. The flexibility is the most important thing for people right now, just because there's so much we have to do, not just on our professional life, in our personal life. And we need that leeway. So if someone requires you to be in the office 9 to 5, it's an issue. If someone requires you to do innovation in a specific time, that's an issue as well. Because you can't have as clear boundaries as you could in previous occupations. Businesses have changed as well. Let's look about business models. You may have seen this table. These are the largest hotel chains in the world with their age, number of rooms, hotels, and countries operated. You know, Airbnb, about 5 years in the making, already surpassing Intercontinental, the number of rooms and the number of countries operated. Albeit these are not specific hotel rooms. But this is an example of a company leveraging the cloud, leveraging the ability that it lets organizations to scale much faster if they have a good product. On the right-hand side, we see the market capitalization. This is from last year. And if you compare it to 20 years ago, of the top 20, there was only one pure tech company, that was HP at number 20. Now, out of the top 10, 4 of them are tech companies. So tech is definitely leading the way. And again, going into organizations, we have some sort of clash, apparently, between different generations. So if you ask a lot of the millennials, what do they like, what do they want, it's meaningful work. Everybody wants to make an impact. And not just because, generations have changed, but you hear that in the news. That's what everyone is interested about. I want to do something. I want to make something. But a lot of managers think that we're all in it for the money. And that becomes an issue. So what does all this mean? This means that organizations need to change and transform. Otherwise, they stay behind. And even the GIF that I've decided to insert over here, that's already obsolete, right? So instead of the laptop and all the different sort of applications, it needs to be a mobile phone. But everything eventually goes out into the virtual world. And we need to understand that if we want to continue to play a part. That was Skype just there. So we're talking about startup and scale up. And I'm getting a lot of these questions. Do we need to act differently on a startup and a scale up? So when you think about startup, what comes to mind? It's small, innovative, fast, simple. Think about scale up. It's big, bureaucratic, and slow, making things complex. And that's where words like entrepreneurship, innovation, change come in, because we need to take the goodness from the startup and see how we can replicate it in the large organization, but also take the maturity and the rigor of a large organization and put it in the startup. And honestly, I've seen organizations, I've seen it in Skype and Microsoft, and I've seen it in Google and different teams. There is a startup culture that can work. There is a small teams, a high-performance team that you have the right culture in place. You could almost operate similar to a startup and succeed in a similar way. So what should we do? See, the time is running out, so let's talk about a few things. First, Steve Jobs talked about it. The issue right now, as I see it with a lot of organization, the change that is required, the transformation is very much in our head. It's a mindset issue. It's a cultural issue. And that makes it so much difficult because it's not something tangible that the CEO can say, this is what I changed. It's trickier than that. Data is completely key. I think back in Skype, it was very important for us, transforming the organization into really being data-driven. It's the key for innovation because the way we do innovation in Google, we have dog fooding. Anybody heard about dog fooding? Dogfooding is basically testing your own product on internal employees. That's the first step. The second step is obviously piloting it in a specific country, specific region, seeing what works, what doesn't. And then obviously you get a lot more learnings from real market tests than any sort of analysis that you do without it, because eventually it's just all assumptions. So that's key, and having a one source of truth is critical to get some alignment and collaboration across the organization. Now, data is king, context is queen, but culture is the throne. That's the marrying element of both data and context. Obviously, data in itself, not enough. Context is important, but context can be misleading as well. So you need to have the right culture in place so you won't run into those issues. And few examples. Everybody heard about the hippo, right? Yes? So that happened, still happening quite a bit. Obviously, the executives come in. I have got the experience. I know best. This is what we need to do. Forget about all this data. However, we're starting to expose those guys, weed them out. So we have what I call a evolved hippo. So someone who understands that they can't shy away from the data. They're just going to massage it, manipulate it, and use it for their own sort of agenda, which makes the change and the cultural elements much, much harder, because these are smart people who know how to use data and manipulate it as well. That's why, again, it comes back to the cultural element. Agile is key. And the one thing that I wanted to talk about agile and lean, sometimes when people say agile, they think it means sloppiness. Lean means unprofessional. No. It's just focusing on what matters, and you could be as professional and rigorous as having all the reports in the world. The reports are just an illusion that you're somehow in control. But if you have the rigor in the first place, leaning is just focusing on what matters. And again, fail, but fail fast. And we're going to talk a little bit about failure. He said it best, right? Why plan? Things change all the time. Again, especially now, we saw how things work in the technology. We're bombarded with data everywhere. So focusing on what truly matters is key, not just in our professional life, in our business, but also in our personal life. We can't do everything. On cloud, for example, there's so much technical elements in it. There's no one person that knows everything. Impossible. But you need to know enough, and you need to know what to focus on. Any multitaskers in the room? A few. We'll put that to the test. So I'm going to ask you, now this is the interactive part. You said it's supposed to be interactive, right? I'm going to measure you. And first, I'm going to ask you to count from 1 to 7 as fast as you can. Okay, wait. Go. Okay, that's fast. Maybe you are multitasking. Now, same thing with letters. Go. Maybe I was wrong. A talented bunch. However, now, try to count this way. 1A, 2B, 3C, all the way. Ready? Go. It's a winner every time. And basically the reason is that first, we're counting in numbers. That's one thing to do. Then we're counting in letters. That's another thing. But combining them, that's when we try to multitask. And our brains are not really good at it. Computers are really good at it because they switch tasks very fast. And that's why there's the myth of multitasking, and I see it all the time. Focus on one thing, get it done, and move over. Moving from one thing to another, you're just losing it. So if you ever go into a meeting and everybody has their laptops on, you're not going to get what you need from it, right? People need to be focused on what you want to say. Obviously, there are books on it and so on. And that's the key problem. I mean, look at this poor guy. I mean, that's the problem in the world today. There's just, too much information to process, and we really need to know how to prioritize. So that's almost the key skill that leaders and managers need. Because if a manager doesn't know how to prioritize properly, then all his teams and everyone around suffer as well, and it's key. And obviously, change is crucial. If there's one thing that I've learned about change throughout the organization, is that you can't force anything on anyone. I mean, it probably sounds intuitive, but organic adoption for people to see the value and go with it is the key thing to change. Otherwise, it will never stick. Once you're gone, they'll go back to their bad habits. And again, another phrase, but really, really true. And that's the problem also in organization, that, especially executives, they want to hear those comforting lies. Nobody really wants to tell them the unpleasant truth. They don't want to hear it as well. How many people, how many are you, would you be comfortable enough going to the exec and saying, things are just messed up? Not a lot. It requires a certain startup-y, entrepreneurship guts to do that. And that's what I mean by challenging the status quo. You need to have the mindset to challenge and say how things are. I mean, there was one, the Sachi, I think, executive, a CEO once mentioned that as you go up in the organization, the stupidest you become. You're too far removed and away from anything that matters, and everybody lies to you. And that's the problem. So how do we do that? First, again, it's a mindset thing. Sir Ken Robinson still has the most viewed TED Talk out there. We need to be prepared to be wrong. I mean, that's the key thing about startup and innovation. But it has a balance, right? Because I also hear the term celebrate failure. No, don't celebrate it. Prepare to be wrong, but learn from it and learn as fast as possible so you could make it better in the next iteration. And everything has to be a balance, right? It's a little bit of art, it's a little bit of science, and sometimes as managers, as leaders, you need to move from the left brain to the right brain multiple times a day. People, your team members are not equal. They're not the same. You can't treat them the same. Everyone, and it's the same thing for organizations. Each organization has their own unique DNA. What works for one organization, if you're going to take it from the shelf, it's not going to work in the other organization. There needs to be fine-tuning, and that's the key insights that I hope some of you would get from here. So infrastructure, I said, focus on what you do best and let the organizations who do this best take care of the rest. Obviously, that's what we talk about in cloud. And again, what we found works for us is, this sort of approach, moving beyond productivity, making it as lean, as agile as possible. I mean, if we talk about Google Apps for Work, for example, it may be not as robust as the Microsoft Office, but robustness nowadays doesn't mean better, right? You only need the features that you need in order to move further. Otherwise, you're just sometimes wasting time. Who knows what this is? Similar. Go, the game of Go, which is, as I understand, far more complex than chess. Anyway, there's a company called DeepMind that Google acquired about a year or so ago. They built a machine called AlphaGo. And this machine beat the master of the game of Go in South Korea this year in a score about 4-1. Now, why is this a big deal? Because unlike, as you remember, IBM Watson also beat Kasparov in chess a few years back. So what's the big deal? The big deal is that the IBM Watson's prime algorithm was a brute force one. So using all the power of compute energy, computing power to go through all the permutation possible and make the play. It's impossible to do that in Go. There's just far too many permutations to use all the computing power in the world and have a move at the same time. So they needed to really develop smart algorithms, truncated neural networks in order to actually learn and improve. And eventually it was an amazing success. Sergey and Larry are always hailing this success. Now, the one thing that I wanted to mention of it is something that I call machine creativity. Because during those games that were live broadcasted everywhere in the world, we had different people talking about the different moves of the machine and Lisa Doll, the master. And there was one move that nobody understood. The machine went to a move that nobody understood. How is that possible? It's not even relevant. But eventually it was that move that led one of the victories of the machine, which, points out the question, is ingenuity or creativity just a human phenomena, or machine maybe know better? So that was the most interesting thing for me during this matchup. We're running out of time. So I'll just finish quickly. They told me 25 minutes. 20 minutes. Yeah, okay. I'll finish up. Thank Culture important. Now, I'll finish up with this. Anybody know what this is? This is actually a live hacking attack across the world. It's a North map. You can go online and view it. You see the origin of the attack, where the attack is going, and any details that you have on it. Now, you may ask, why am I putting this sort of slide on the cultural element? Because of this. Your own employees are responsible from the primary hacking to your organization. And that's why, in order to solve cybersecurity, you don't need more software or more professionals. You need to have the right culture in place, so you remove the motivation of any sort of disgruntled employee to help hackers hack your organization. Now, I think we are out of time, so I can't finish. But let's finish it with this. I mean, he says culture eats strategy for breakfast. It eats talent for breakfast too. I mean, talent can go sour, and culture, remains as long as you maintain it. And with that, I guess I'm out of time.
Thank you so much.